two men, two names carved into British boxing history. Chris EUBANK Jr. and Conor Benn, the heirs to a rivalry that has burned for more than 30 years. The sons of icons who once stood toe-to-toe in front of a nation now find themselves trapped in that same cycle of pride, family, and legacy. But this time, the fire burns hotter. Back in April, under the bright lights of Tottenham Hotspur Stadium, they gave us 12 rounds that shook the sport. It was brutal, emotional, unpredictable, a clash that lived up to 3 decades of anticipation. When the bell rang, neither man had truly won the night. Both had inherited the ghosts of their fathers and rewritten the story for a new era. EUBANK walked away convinced he'd proven his class. Benn walked away believing he'd been robbed of destiny. And the world, the same world that had watched their fathers bloodied wars in the 1990s, was once again divided. Now, on November 15th, those divisions returned to the ring. The air is thick with unfinished business. EUBANKstands.com, calculated, almost surgical in his confidence. His voice, slow and sharp, cuts through the tension. It's not arrogance, it's control. A man who believes timing is everything, that he dictates when history moves. Benn, on the other hand, is a storm barely contained. He leans forward, eyes steady, voice full of heat. He's not here for control. He's here for redemption. He's here to erase that single decision that still haunts him every night. To him, November 15th isn't a rematch. It's revenge. And between these two men lies something far heavier than belts or rankings. A lifetime of expectation. One son carrying the EUBANK name, raised to believe discipline conquers chaos. The other carrying the Benn legacy, taught that heart and fury can break through anything. They've both lived in the long shadows of giants. Now they're fighting to prove that those shadows don't define them, that their names belong in the same breath as the men who started it all. But beneath the headlines and bravado, there's a quieter question every fan can feel. When the gloves touch in November, will it be about fathers or about sons? Because this isn't just another fight, it's a generational reckoning. And for whichever man falls first, history won't remember the excuses. It'll remember who stood tallest when pride met blood. Unfinished business has a date, November 15th, and the world is watching. Long before the cameras, before the tweets, before the microphones and media days, there were two fathers who built the stage these sons now stand on. Nigel Benn and Chris EUBANK are two men whose rivalry defined British boxing in the 1990s. Their fights weren't just sporting events, they were cultural earthquakes. The first bout in 1990 ended with Benn crumpled on the ropes and EUBANK SR roaring in triumph. The second, in 1993, was a brutal stalemate that left both men scarred and the nation split right down the middle. That's the shadow both sons were born into. The Benn EUBANK feud isn't just about wins and losses, it's about identity. For Nigel, the Dark Destroyer, fighting was a way to survive. For EUBANK SR, the ring was theater, a stage for discipline and dignity. Two philosophies, two bloodlines. And now, those philosophies are colliding again through their children. Chris EUBANK Jr. inherited his father's composure, the tailored suits, the clipped words, the sense of control. But underneath that calm exterior lies the frustration of never quite being acknowledged as elite. His career has been a test of patience, a man good enough to beat most, still searching for the victory that defines him. He's fought the critics, the doubters, even the ghost of Liam Smith, the one man who exposed his guard, only for EUBANK to come back and redeem himself in a rematch. Conor Benn, on the other hand, is carved from raw emotion. Every punch, every stare carries the hunger of a fighter trying to escape his father's shadow. His career started quietly, then exploded with knockouts, swagger, and noise. But controversy never stayed far. The 2022 drug test saga tainted his rise, freezing a career that had been accelerating towards super. For some, that scandal still clouds his name. For others, it only sharpened his defiance. When these two names finally met inside Tottenham Hotspur Stadium earlier this year, the weight of 3 decades crashed down at once. For 12 rounds they carried not just their own dreams, but the ghosts of their fathers. The result? A unanimous decision for EUBANK Jr., but no closure. Benn claimed he was 1 round from glory. EUBANK insisted he'd prove the gap in class. And the fans were left arguing over who truly owned the night. That's what makes this rematch so volatile. This isn't just another date on the boxing calendar, it's an inheritance war. The sons of Benn and EUBANK aren't only fighting each other, they're fighting to decide whose version of history becomes truth. In the lead up to the face-off, you could feel that legacy pressing down on them. EUBANKJRs.com replies, "Some people are loved, some people are hated. We are who we are," echo his father's cold confidence. Benn's interruptions, his smirks, his open challenge, they carry the chaos and courage that made Nigel a fan favorite. Both men talk about family, about lessons learned, but every sentence has an edge. When Benn says, "Everything I do is for my kids," he's speaking as a man trying to rewrite a headline. When Eubank answers, material things don't make me happy. Winning does. He's reminding everyone that for him, control equals pride. And that's the tragedy and the beauty of this story. Two men shaped by history, desperate to break free from it, yet bound tighter with every punch they throw. November 15th isn't just a rematch. It's the continuation of a generational argument that started long before either of them was born. The moment they sat down across from each other, you could feel it. The tension wasn't staged. It was personal. The face-off wasn't a promotional stunt. It was a psychological war fought in silence, smirks, and words that cut deeper than any jab ever could. Eubank Jr. sat upright, unbothered, wearing that half-smile that fans have come to both admire and despise. Across the table, Benn leaned forward, restless, his body language a mix of respect and restrained fury. Benn started with an olive branch. "I respect you, Chris. I think you're a good guy." But before the words could even breathe, the energy shifted. Eubank interrupted, calm but firm. "You said you were the people's champ." The correction wasn't about ego. It was about dominance. He was reminding Benn, and everyone watching, who controls the rhythm of this rivalry. Asterisk, it was a small exchange, but it set the tone. The air between them thickened, every word becoming a counterpunch. Benn called Eubank refined, mocking his polished vocabulary and posh background, while Eubank calmly countered, "I went to private school before I got expelled." It was humor wrapped in control, the kind of line that makes you forget who's teasing whom. The psychological contrast couldn't have been sharper. Benn, tattoos visible, intensity radiating. Eubank, composed, measured, detached. It's not just personality, it's strategy. Benn fights with his emotions. Eubank feeds off them. Then came the first big flashpoint. Benn leaned in. "We should have been fighting in September, not November. You were too busy playing in casinos and living that lavish life." The accusation hung in the air, a jab at Eubank's discipline, his work ethic, his hunger. Eubank didn't flinch. He smiled. "I just went on holiday with my family. It's been a tough 3 years." The contrast was cinematic. One man emotional, desperate to prove a point, the other, too cool to be provoked. Eubank's composure wasn't just natural, it was tactical. The more Benn pressed, the calmer he became. Asterisk, that single line, "We'll fight when I want to fight," was the moment Eubank took control of the room. It was psychological warfare at its peak. Benn wanted to talk heart. Eubank wanted to talk hierarchy. From there, the insults turned philosophical. Benn accused Eubank of living off material success. Eubank shot back, "Material things don't make me happy. Winning does." That's the difference between them. One fights for validation, the other fights for self-definition. Benn tried to pull him into the mud, talking cars, casinos, flashy lifestyles. Eubank stayed in the clouds above it all, playing the long game. Every time Benn tried to heat things up, Eubank cooled them down. But not all control is invincible. There were cracks, brief, fleeting moments where Eubank's smirk wavered, where Benn's words landed just deep enough. When Benn said, "I smell pain, I smell undiscipline," you could see Eubank's jaw tighten for the first time. And then, the ultimate reversal. Benn laughed, saying, "Every time I jump in that rolls, I say, 'Thank you, Chris.'" Eubank chuckled, but behind that smile was a sting. Because Benn had flipped the insult, he turned Eubank's own success into a reminder that their rivalry fuels each other's lives. The exchange spiraled into a blur of interruptions, words like pain, discipline, and legacy bouncing across the table. But the key moment came later, when Benn said he wanted to chase world titles, and Eubank dismissed it as politics. Asterisk, that line wasn't an excuse. It was a declaration. Eubank wasn't chasing belts, he was chasing names. And right now, the only name that mattered was Benn. By the end, the tone had shifted. The respect was gone. The smiles had hardened. What began as a tense conversation had turned into a standoff of principles, discipline versus defiance, order versus emotion. As they stood to leave, Benn still carried that restless fire, shaking his head, muttering challenges. Eubank just sat there, smirking, the look of a man who believes he's already won the mental battle long before the first bell. But the truth is, in that DAZN studio, no one truly won. They both revealed something raw to men hiding their insecurities behind the armor of legacy. And when they meet again, all those unsaid words will come swinging back, in the form of fists. The countdown has begun. Every day closer to November 15th feels heavier, not just for the fighters, but for the entire British boxing scene. Because this isn't a simple return bout. This is redemption, reputation, and revenge, all rolled into one night under the Tottenham lights. Conor Benn has been showing the kind of intensity that borders on obsession. The training clips leaking from his camp don't look like a fighter preparing for a fight. They look like a man exercising ghosts. Early morning road work, endless sparring rounds. The kind of conditioning that breaks ordinary fighters. Benn wears it like punishment and purpose all at once. He's been telling reporters, "I'm a new man." But you can still see the same rage flicker when Eubank's name comes up. That's the paradox. Benn says he's changed, but his fire hasn't cooled. Across the aisle, Chris Eubank Jr. looks like a man sculpted from calm. Smooth interviews, smart suits, his words deliberate, he's emotional. I'm systematic. That single phrase has become his entire fight philosophy. His camp has focused on precision, shorter combinations, sharper defense, timed counterpunch. The message is clear. Benn fights with heat, EUBANK fights with control, but it's outside the ring where the war is being waged hardest. Social media has turned into a battlefield. Clips from the face-off circulate daily, fans dissecting every smirk, every word. Is Benn truly calm this time? Is EUBANK overconfident? Every post, every comment fuels the storm. Promoters know what they have, a generational rivalry, reborn. DAZN's coverage frames it like a movie sequel, unfinished business. And that tagline couldn't be more accurate, because what's coming isn't just another 12 rounds. It's the resolution of everything that's been festering since April. The mind games, the press conference taunts, the ghosts of their fathers. And the lingering question, which son finally steps out of the shadow? Both men claim they've evolved. Both swear they're better. But the truth is, evolution in boxing doesn't come from time. It comes from pain. It comes from losing, from humiliation, from nights spent replaying mistakes. And on November 15th, one of them will learn that lesson all over again. This time, there will be no moral victories. Only one man walks away with legacy intact, and the other becomes part of the story his father once told. Every great rivalry ends the same way, not with words, but with silence. The kind of silence that follows the final bell. When two men who've carried history on their backs finally stop swinging and start breathing, that silence is what November 15th is really about. For Chris EUBANK Jr., it's about closure. The proof that composure, intelligence, and discipline can outlast chaos. That you don't need to shout to be remembered, you just need to win when it matters most. For Conor Benn, it's about redemption, not from critics, not from the press, but from himself. The drug test, the doubt, the near miss of April, all of it disappears if he can find the one punch that rewrites his name in gold. This fight isn't about titles, it's about identity. One man fights for legacy, the other for deliverance. And when the bell rings, all the noise, the interviews, the headlines, the father's ghosts fades into the roar of 70,000 fans. Demanding a finish? Asterisk, they can pretend it's calm. They can talk about growth, respect, and family. But when that first jab lands, every promise of peace will vanish. What's left will be raw instinct, the pure essence of what their fathers once called the fight within the fight. When history turns its page on November 15th, one of these men will finally escape the shadow. The other will be swallowed by it. So here's the question. When the lights fade and the dust settles, whose name will echo in the silence? Chris EUBANK Jr., the tactician of legacy, or Conor Benn, the son reborn through war? Comment your prediction below, subscribe for Fight Night coverage, and remember, in boxing, history never ends. It just waits for the next round.